So as you can see, this is going to be another photo walk video. However, I want to try starting these off a little bit differently now. I'm hoping to preface these photo walk videos with a bit more of either a story or maybe something of like, what did I learn from that walk? You know, just to shake it up a little bit so that way it's not always just from my POV. So tonight, a group of us are going to go out to Pike Place Market. They're supposed to be doing the tree and Christmas lighting ceremony. So this will be a great opportunity to get some street photos, especially night photography. So sit back and enjoy. So one habit I'm trying to pick up is to keep like a little journal when I go on these photo walks. So I'm just writing different things like what kind of equipment I use, what the weather was like, also the time of day. So that way I can get an idea of like when certain places get busy or just like what kind of environment it'll be like in the city. And this way I could always look back to see what kind of lenses I used, and that way I can input the right metadata and calibration to my photos.
Nasty. I'm doing manual exposure. I'm gonna go down 2.8.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Like my house was like 3 clouds.
Perfect weather right now.
Yeah, like
Which one? Well, that's your decision. If you want to use that, go for it.
Now here my friend was asking me what kind of lens she should use for the shoot. Now I'm inclined to go with something more like a prime lens or something a little smaller and more compact, so that way it's a little more concealed, so to say, when I take photos. If I remember correctly, she was using a 70 to 200 millimeter lens, at least in this part of the shoot. In my opinion, that's a little bit of a heavy lens to carry around. Plus, it's a little bit daunting if you were to walk by as a pedestrian and you see that pointed in your face. But the nice thing about telephotos is you can be at a distance and kind of be respectful of people's space. But my preference is to go with more of a prime lens, something with like a 35 millimeter to a 50 millimeter.
Oh, hell yeah, see? Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Oh, see, this looks like it could be on one of those like hipster Christmas vlogs or.
Now the nice thing about doing the photo shoot on the start of the holiday season, you just get all these crowds, people starting to do shopping, going to see Santa, and then there's just this random Indian celebration going on. I don't know exactly what it was, but they were just walking and chanting and playing music all around the Westlake Center. So as soon as I saw that, my photographer instincts kicked in and I tried to run ahead and get in front of the pack so I can get as many photos as I could. Luckily, I managed to catch a few since I was using an all manual lens. Now, something you might notice is I used a lot of black and white filters on these photos. Well, that was a personal preference. Since it was getting dark and you have all the different light sources coming in, you get these weird white balance issues. So for me, it just felt more aesthetically pleasing to go black and white, and it just feels a little bit more timeless. The first lens I was using was the Voigtlander Nocton Classic. It has a 40mm focal length and has an aperture of 1.4. Now, one suggestion Randy brought up in the beginning was that I should switch my sensor from full frame to APS-C. By doing that, it gets a little bit more of a crop and changes my focal length from a 40mm to a 60mm. And this is one function I always forget that my Sony has. It was kind of nice to shoot in APS-C mode and be able to stand at a distance with a 40mm lens. Now, the next lens I swapped to was the Canon FD 50mm with a 1.8 aperture. This is actually my dad's old vintage lens from his Canon AE1. And with the APS-C sensor, it converted it to a 75 millimeter focal length, which it actually was pretty nice. And as you can see in the photos, that, you know, it was pretty sharp, but also I'm still trying to tune my eye so that way I can get a little bit better at pinpoint sharpness.
Hire me, Starbucks.
Now that we're far, I see you closer. Now that we're not talking, I know you better. Now that we're far, I see you closer. Now that we're not talking, I know you better. When we get out of this, I want to hold you closer. When we recover, will we remember each other? When we get out of this, I want to hold you closer. When we recover, will we remember each other?
Now this next lens I swapped to was the Samyang 35mm 1.8. It has autofocus, and the reason I swapped to it was because it's getting a little dark and it was very crowded. And rather than take the time to fumble, I decided to just go with something with autofocus. Although I did keep everything at manual exposure because I had the right settings I wanted. Now, of course, with manual exposure, you're not always going to get the best exposed images, especially if there's such stark differences between outdoors and indoor lighting. As you can see with this shot that I did of this woman in the cafe, originally the image was very, very blown out, but I felt confident enough that the raw image was going to be fine. There's enough information for me to pull the exposure down and to work with it. So after being in the market, we decided to go over to the viewpoint where you get a nice scenic view of the waterfront and the Ferris wheel. Now, unfortunately, it was very dark, so one, you can't see the water, but two, my GoPro was not set properly and it just doesn't have the best low light settings. But I did get some great shots, again, mostly black and white because it was kind of dark and the lighting was not the best, but you adapt. So as we were going back towards the front of the market, this is around where you see the guys who throw fish. We started to see there's this big crowd and there was no way we were going to get through that. We managed to turn back around and get in the back of the crowd. And as soon as we found a place that we were able to kind of hunker down, that's when they were doing the final countdown and the lights came on. And afterwards, it was just a huge crowd of people just dispersing, so we were kind of stuck. It was didn't make sense to try to fight the crowd. So rather than fighting, we camped out in that one spot and just started taking pictures of people. But the nice thing about being in a crowd is that people don't pay attention to you. They're trying to get the hell out of wherever they're at, and you get to capture some nice moments. Especially there was that kid that you saw earlier. So with the ground being wet and it being night, you get some really great opportunities to get some like really slick looking foregrounds or backgrounds, however you want to do it. But it just has a nice aesthetic. And with the Pike Place Market sign being lit up, I was like, hey, let's get some low shots. The funny thing was, while Randy and I were knelt down taking photos, some lady just ended up walking over and just was like literally like towering over me to kind of like look at what I was doing. Like I didn't let it bother me because I was like in my own little world, but I could sense someone was watching me. And then she, as you see in the video, she walked away. I did ask my friends if this lady was just like creeping on me, and they're like, yeah, she was.
Dude, this looks Honey Court or closing? Honey Court? Alright, we're gonna go to Honey Court in Chinatown.
I hope you guys enjoyed going on that walk. Until next time, see ya.